Machiavelli, Wit's End, Virtue, Fortune, and the Purpose of Comedy by me, Katherine, and my mentor is Dr. Barkalow. So Machiavelli has 3 different definitions of virtue that he gives us in his political works. He says the first definition is manliness, which is a strength or a force that a prince has that enables him to control those he rules over. For a prince, when they depend on their own and are able to force, then there's rarely a time that they are endangered. Therefore, they're more secure because they're more strong. The second definition is a civic faith, which is more like a humanity, or more of a respect to those that you're ruling and their respect for you. Here he says a prince should abstain from the goods of his citizens and subjects and from their women. In this case, this is a way for you to promote respect with them and, again, them back to you. And the third is piety or morality. This is more the traditional thing that we would consider virtue, the traditional idea of morality. He says it is praiseworthy for a prince to maintain faith and to live by integrity and not by cunning. This becomes complicated when Machiavelli introduces fortune, which he does introduce as connected to virtue. However, he never gives us 3 specific definitions of fortune that would go along with the 3 virtues, or tells us that the one he gives us of fortune covers all 3. In his chapter on fortune in The Prince, he starts out by saying that many have had and still have the opinion that because the things of the world are in a mode governed by fortune and by God, that men with their prudence are unable to correct them. Here he's basically saying that men are completely, their actions are completely governed by fortune, by God. They have no free will. He has an issue with this. He doesn't believe that this is true. So he kind of remedies it by saying in the second quote that fortune is the arbiter of half of our actions, but she lets us the other half. So therefore, we're allowed to do half of our things on our own, whereas the other half, fortune kind of governs, or God is acting through us. We're still not where he would consider an ideal prince to be. He considers the ideal to fall along the lines of, if one wishes to keep fortune down, it is necessary to beat her and knock her down. She lets herself be overcome more by these men. Thus, he uses Pope Julius as an example, but Julius isn't truly virtuous for him either, because Julius is a pope and therefore he's religious. But this is his example of something that he would consider closest to virtue. But as it says at the bottom here, that he never gives us an example of this virtuous prince. He just gives us some characteristics, but never even a true definition of this person. So this leads directly to my research question, which is, in what manner and to what extent do Machiavelli's Clytium and Dragula complete his account of the relationship between virtue and fortune provided in his political works? The methodology I've used all summer hasn't changed. I'm using a textual analysis in order to determine the direct and indirect meaning of the author. I'm doing this because philosophers are known to write covertly, which they do in order to avoid persecution in respect to their social responsibilities, but it's also just a style of education for philosophy in general. This is especially appropriate for Machiavelli, as this bottom quote is directly from him, saying, "For a long time I have not said what I believed, nor do I ever believe what I say, and if indeed sometimes I do happen to tell the truth, I hide it among so many lies that it is hard to find." Machiavelli is directly telling us that whatever you're reading on the surface isn't correct. You have to look deeper. My research question speaks directly to the scholarly tension of comedy versus tragedy, especially in regards to Machiavelli's literature. Those who believe Machiavelli is comic say that his challenges to conventional authority illuminate how properly armed humans can master the natural and divine forces seen as thwarting their earthly designs, which means master fortune. Those who consider Machiavelli to be tragic say that he concludes humans are always subject to and often crushed by these forces. So therefore, if you want to consider it the easiest way you can, for a comic ending, virtue would overcome fortune, whereas for a tragic ending, fortune would overcome virtue. So, comedy and tragedy can be seen most clearly in Machiavelli's use of conspiracy. For Machiavelli, a conspirator must determine a scheme that is beneficial to himself and to his city, or to one or the other, depending on what he's going for. The conspirator can easily fail due to report, which is telling either too many people or just telling one person who tells everybody. Or conjecture, where you don't necessarily tell anybody, but you can't hide your own tracks. People are like finding little clues, they're realizing what you're doing. So obviously a conspirator must be virtuous, close to the prince, and deceitful, because if it doesn't remain a secret, it's not going to be successful. The first play of his that I studied was Clytia. So a quick plot overview. Nicomachus is the head of the household, and he derives a conspiracy out of lust for essentially his stepdaughter. And his wife Sophronia is forced to create a counter-conspiracy to protect her family and prevent him from getting where he wants to be with his stepdaughter. So this conspiracy allows her to return her household back to the first principles and also restore respectability for the household among its peers. She does this mostly by dismissing morality and removing traditional familial roles, which allows her to be flexible and allows her to basically, even though she's the wife, overcome her husband. So Sophronia refounds the family through Nicomaco's fear of ridicule, which is one of the big reasons we can determine Sophronia to be the most Machiavellian character in the play. In telling the story of what happened to him to his friend Damon, Nicomaco starts to explain what happened the night that he went to meet Clytia, which is the stepdaughter, in bed. He says, "I went to kiss her, and with her other hand she pushed my face away. I went to throw myself all over her, and she gave me a shot with her knee, so hard that she broke one of my ribs. When I saw force would be enough, I turned to pleading, and with sweet, loving words and a quiet voice so that she wouldn't recognize me. I turned to threats, and I began to speak foul abuses about what I would both do to her and say to her. Well, don't you know that all at once she gathered up her legs and threw me a couple kicks. I felt myself being stabbed in the flank and being given 5 or 6 accursed shots under the rump, and half asleep as I was, I immediately put my hand down there and found something firm and pointy, and so completely terrified, I jumped out of bed." He then goes outside to find his servant to get a little help, figure out what's going on, and Piero ran, and when he returned with a light, we saw, instead of Clytia, Ciro, my servant, upright on the bed, entirely naked. Ciro is his male servant, who his wife replaced with Clytia, in order to ridicule him and embarrass him in front of everyone. So Sophronia's schemes and her strength allow her to become a balance of the lion and the fox. The lion because she's so strong and is able to execute this, but the fox because she's cunning, she has deceit, she's doing all of those sly things that you would consider a fox. Fortune is usually considered unstoppable because humans are usually considered not flexible enough to overcome her in all of her different forms, but Sophronia represents something called ordered virtue, which is needed to do so, which we'll talk about later. So the second play I looked at was Mandragola. In this one, a younger man, Callimaco, lusts for a married woman, and her name is Lucretia, and with help from his friend Ligurio, they create a conspiracy for him to get her to commit adultery and sleep with him. So he uses Lucretia and her husband's Nicia's desire to have a child to convince them of this Mandragola root remedy that will allow her to become pregnant, but it will also kill the first person who sleeps with her in an 8-day period. So while Sophronia is the clear Machiavellian character in the first play, there's a conflict over which character displays the highest virtue in Machiavellian terms in this second play. From studying the political and literary works, Nicia becomes the clear embodiment of Machiavellian virtue. Though he is considered the simplest and most stupid man in Florence, this is an example of Machiavelli's deception that we talked about earlier. He doesn't want you to look at the character on the surface that seems to be the most virtuous. He wants you to dig a little deeper. Nicia is more personally benefited by agreeing to conspiracy. His benefit is higher than Callimaco, who gets a fleeting benefit from being able to sleep with this woman he desires after. But Nicia gets an heir, and an heir is a much more permanent benefit. And you also know, while Nicia seems to think that it's really this remedy that's going to fix his problem, the reader knows the whole time that Nicia is just really old and impotent, and that's really the issue. So he forces Callimaco to undergo a physical examination before he allows any of this to happen, and here he could have prevented the whole thing from happening, but instead of doing so, he secures his benefit, which kind of leads us to think that he is a lot smarter than people lead on for him to be, and therefore the person that Machiavelli wants us to realize is the most virtuous. And another clue that Machiavelli slips in there is his name, Nicia, which actually derives from the word Nike, which is Greek for victory. So Machiavelli's overall conspiracy culminates in a critique of Christianity. He rejects Christian doctrine, which you can find in Augustine. They both have an account of Lucretia, whereas Augustine's is the more older religious form of that tale. Machiavelli spins the tale, and Lucretia actually gets a personal benefit by getting to be with a younger man, whereas Augustine's Lucretia is a true story where she kills herself. Machiavelli clearly rejects all morality as far as getting personal benefit, and has no problem with acquisition or the desire for glory, the desire for material goods, whereas Augustine considers people that fall into that category to be completely not virtuous. Machiavelli sees the church as the source of the weakness of men and also the fall of Rome, whereas Augustine sees Rome's worship of pagan gods to be the reason that they fell. Machiavelli also considers the political world to be better when it is in power over the religious world, and therefore Augustine's want of the religious world to be more powerful is again a departure that Machiavelli takes. He also uses Frate Timoteo as an example of the corruption in the Christian institution. Frate Timoteo is one of the integral people in the play that gets Lucretia to, at the end, agree to this adultery. He convinces her that he will absolve her of all sins and God won't be mad at her for doing this. in order to get him to agree, what they first did was made him agree to a more serious leap of any kind of virtue by getting him to agree to actually a fake story about some girl who needed an abortion. So they tell him, oh no, that was just a joke. We just need this girl to commit adultery. So when looking at Machiavelli's literary teachings, we can begin to determine his purpose in using comedy. He says in the prologue to Dracula that if this material is not worthy, on account of its being so light, of a man who wishes to seem wise and great, he is trying with these vain thoughts to make his wretched time more pleasant. He's basically telling us here that he's using a light and airy genre to talk about something a lot more grave, so that people will listen to him more. Between the two plays, there's actually, at the end of each act in each play, there's a song. Two of them are shared between the two plays. The first one's about love, and it is used by Machiavelli to introduce love and desire as powerful forces that a man must prudently control in order to be virtuous. The second one is about deception, which we talked about with the conspiracies. He says that trickery is a remedy high and rare that sort of shows the straight path to wandering souls. Basically saying that deception and trickery is what can allow you to remove these traditional morality, borders of morality, and look for the personal benefit you can find by ignoring them. So if we revisit the comedy and tragedy debate, you can see that Machiavelli's plays aren't tragic, they are comic. Within the plays, both conspiracies are successful, and no character has a truly tragic ending. The comedies are used as examples of Machiavelli's political teachings. There are characters who embody Machiavellian virtue, like Sophronia that we talked about earlier, but there are characters who embody other lessons that we find in the political works, like Callimaco, who is an embodiment of human nature as the desire he has for Lucretia really is what controls how he acts instead of his virtue controlling that desire. So I've been throwing around the word virtue this whole time, and I told you there was 3 different definitions. Well, Machiavelli considers the first definition of these to be the most important, while the appearance of the second and the third one is better than actually having them. He says you ought to take great care that nothing, that the prince ought to take great care that nothing goes out of his mouth, which is not full of the 5 qualities written above, that he appears to be, when one sees and hears him, all pity, all faith, all integrity, all humanity, and all religion. The important quote here is that he appears to be. Machiavelli doesn't want him to strictly regard these as his limitations for how he can act. He wants a prince to know when to prudently use each definition of virtue in order to receive the most glory or to get where he needs to be. So prudence for him consists of knowing how to recognize the qualities of the inconveniences and to pick the less bad as good. This allows for the dismissal of morality and to choose when and where to use which of the virtues, and also when to appear to be looking at be acting in the second and third ones when really something a little slyer is going on under the surface. When we step back and look at Machiavelli's teachings as a whole, he doesn't only reject Augustine, but also critiques Aristotle. For Aristotle, tragedy is complete, self-sufficient, serious, pleasing to the audience, and it imitates virtue. It is the best of the literary genres. He has a problem with comedy. He says that comedy imitates base people and is an imitation of vice instead of virtue. Machiavelli, in his Prince, in the chapter 15, he actually lists all of Aristotle's virtues, which can be found in his Ethics, and he explains how you can prudently use each one of these vices for your own personal benefit, and says that that's okay. For Machiavelli, his goal is to create new philosophic modes and orders for the city. He's using a new genre to do this. He rejects Aristotle's methods of maintaining the city in order to eliminate it entirely, so that also means eliminating the ways that Aristotle believes are the best ways of doing this, so that he can just completely eliminate it and recreate it with his own modes and orders and using this genre of comedy. So my research is still to be continued. I worked on my political analysis prior to the ATP project, and I will continue into the fall and spring, and I will end in my honors thesis, which I will be finishing in the spring. So far I've completed 3 analytic chapters, my political chapter and then 1 on each of these plays, and my next step will be a further analysis of Machiavelli's critique of Aristotle, and I've got a few books to read. Thank you, Dr. Barkalow.